Hi, and welcome back to the Throne of France. This video concludes our three-part series on the mistresses of the Sun King, Louis XIV. Françoise d'Aubigné was the daughter of Constant d'Aubigné and his second wife, Jeanne de Cardillac. Constant, after abandoning his Protestant faith in 1618, soon fell into disgrace. In 1619, he murdered his first wife and her lover, and was even suspected of treasonable contact with the English. As a result, he spent years imprisoned in places such as Bordeaux, the Château Trompette, and Niort. It was in the prison of Niort that Françoise was born on November 27, 1635. She was baptized at the local Notre Dame parish. During her infancy, she was entrusted for some time to her Protestant aunt, Madame de Villette, at the Château de Moursay. Later, she even lived briefly in Martinique, where her father had been appointed governor of the neighboring island of Marie-Galante, a position that, in truth, meant very little since the land was still undeveloped. The family endured hardship, but this early time in the Caribbean left a lasting impression on Françoise. Though baptized a Catholic, her father raised her in the Protestant faith. In 1645, he returned to France, and his family followed 2 years later, only to discover that Constant had died. Françoise's mother settled in La Rochelle with her 3 children, living in poverty. Once again, Madame de Villette took the girl in and continued her Protestant upbringing. But this would not last. Françoise's Catholic godmother, Madame de Noyon, a lady-in-waiting to Queen Anne of Austria, found it intolerable that the child was being raised Protestant. She intervened and placed Françoise in a convent against her will. At first resistant, Françoise was eventually moved by the gentle care of one of the nuns, and she embraced Catholicism. Although she was poor, Françoise had noble blood, which allowed her to enter Parisian high society. She frequented the salon of the poet Paul Scarron, who was 25 years older and crippled by illness. Struck by her wit and charm, Scarron proposed 2 options. He would provide her money to enter a convent, or she could marry him. At just 16, she chose marriage. As Madame Scarron, she became the hostess of her husband's lively literary salon, earning the respect of many cultured figures of the time. When Scarron died in 1660, however, he left her only debts. To prevent her from falling into destitution, Queen Anne of Austria granted her a pension, which kept her in Parisian society. When the Queen Mother died in 1666, the pension was suspended by Louis XIV, but it was soon restored thanks to the intervention of Madame de Montespan, then rising as the king's new favorite. For a short time, Françoise was mistress to the Marquis de Villasceau, a friend of the king, but she eventually withdrew from that life and styled herself as a virtuous widow. In 1669, she accepted the position of governess to the illegitimate children of Louis XIV and Madame de Montespan. She settled discreetly near Paris, and first met the king when he came to visit his children. Over time, he grew fond not only of her appearance, but of her gentle and devoted nature. This stirred jealousy in Madame de Montespan. Françoise threatened to resign, but the king persuaded her to stay, offering her money and favors. In 1674, she purchased the Château de Maintenon, from which she would later take her title of Marquise de Maintenon. As Montespan's star waned and another royal favorite died suddenly, Madame de Maintenon rose ever closer to the king. After the death of Queen Maria Theresa in 1683, Françoise, now nearly 48, secretly married Louis XIV. The marriage was never publicly acknowledged, but it gave her a unique and ambiguous role. Officially a mere courtier, privately the king's wife. Her influence at court has often been exaggerated. While Louis sought her counsel and valued her deeply, he remained firmly the master of his own decisions. At times, he even reminded her harshly of her humble origins. Yet she never claimed to be a politician, always calling herself a novice in matters of state. After Louis XIV's death in 1715, the regent, Philippe d'Orléans, annulled the king's will that favored her. Madame de Maintenon withdrew to Saint-Cyr, the boarding school she had founded in 1685 for the daughters of impoverished nobles. She lived there quietly, even receiving a visit from Tsar Peter the Great in 1717. Françoise d'Aubigné, Marquise de Maintenon, died there on April 15, 1719, at the age of 83, 4 years after the Sun King himself. And with her story, we conclude this 3-part series on the mistresses of Louis XIV. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and take care.